Good morning, Life Tabernacle Church. I'm honored this morning to bring the encouraging word of the day. Thankful that Pastor offered the opportunity to do so. I want to first and foremost let you all know how thankful I am that Life Tabernacle Church prayed for us as we battled this mild strain of the coronavirus. I'm very thankful. I'm grateful that there's a church body lifting us up in prayer. It wasn't a walk in the park. It was uncomfortable. However, we had peace knowing that our church was praying for us. And so I'm thankful at this time. We had a bit of a scare with Krista a couple Friday nights ago, where she began to have some very severe symptoms. And we prayed and called on a few others to pray, and God healed her immediately. And that just, I can't express to you enough how grateful I am that you took time to petition, to pray for us. And I do know, and I believe that that's why we had peace in this season during this trial, that we knew that God had us in the palm of his hands because his church was praying. And so I wanted to let you all know that we are thankful. But I do want to bring a few minutes of encouragement this morning. Pastor has walked through the final days leading up to the crucifixion, and as he's mentioned, this is a very special week because the Jewish calendar and the Passover lines up with the Christian calendar of Easter, and so it allows us for context. It allows us to walk through the steps of Jesus and understand what was happening in the week leading up to his crucifixion. So Passover would have began, as we know, began last night. And so if we follow that same schedule, Passover began last night. Last night would have been the Last Supper and the night that Jesus prays in the Garden of Gethsemane. Today would be the day of trials, of the religious and secular trials and judgments, when Jesus was submitted before Caiaphas, the high priest, and the Sanhedrin court. And then he would have been taken to Pontius Pilate, the Roman governor of the area, then to Herod, and back to Pilate for his final judgment. And tonight would be the second night of the Passover, and the Jewish tradition calls for a feast on the first night where they kill the Passover lamb, and then and it's called, and the feast each night is called the Seder, and then the Jewish tradition though would call for the Seder on the second night of the Passover. And so tonight, after if we're walking through the steps of Jesus tonight, after the judgment of Jesus, families would be gathering around the table to participate in the Seder once more, where they would eat their unleavened bread, they drink their wine, they'd eat their bread with the bitter spices, and they would, part of the tradition would, they would sit down and they would retell the story of the Passover, the original Passover and the Exodus from Egypt. And some people believe that Jesus participated in the traditional Seder dinner in the Last Supper, but he obviously wouldn't have been able to participate on the second night. But it's interesting when you think about it, because the main point of the Seder, the main point of Passover, is remembering what God did in Egypt in the book of Exodus, when the initial Passover began. And let's entertain the thought that Jesus did participate in the Seder the exact same way that tradition tells, and that tradition would call for even today for them to participate in. It's interesting because instead of dwelling on the past, instead of dwelling on everything that happened in Egypt, Jesus emphasized the future. He says, as often as you do moving forward, do it in remembrance of me. Why? Because he was about to revolutionize the Passover. He said, here's the bread. He broke it and blessed it and said, here's the bread, this is my body. And he said, here's the wine, that's my blood that is shed for many. He, instead of stopping and talking about what he did thousands of years before, he said, this is what I'm about to do. This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to revolutionize this entire world. The Jewish tradition had everyone dwelling on past triumphs, that they missed Revelation and they missed how Jesus intended to radically transform their lives. And I don't think that there's no greater proof of that than the preachers, the ministers, and theologians of the day, right? The Pharisees, the Sadducees, who would deny Jesus and who he said he was, because they were so wrapped up in what happened in the past. They were so concerned with tradition that they missed revelation. Passover is about remembering the redemption of God as he delivered the Israelites from Egypt. But Jesus, as the Passover lamb, would offer so much a greater redemption as he would free humanity from the bondage and slavery of sin. And he did that by not dwelling on the past, and he emphasized that in the Last Supper, to not dwell on the past. And so I want to encourage you this morning, take a moment, as the Jewish world celebrates the Passover, and they remember the Exodus from their slavery. They remember God's redemption from the chains of slavery and God delivering them out of Egypt. I want you to take a moment and remember all that God has done for you, but understand that Passover was just the beginning. That Passover was just what God was doing to bring them out. He wanted to take them into the promised land. Jesus died on the cross so that we could come out of our sin, and he then wants to take us into new life. I want us to take a minute and remember what God has done, but I don't want us to dwell on the past. I want to encourage you this morning that your best days are not behind you. God is doing greater things, will do greater things in your life than you could ever imagine if you will allow him to take you in. God brought you out of sin. Now he wants to take you in. He wants to take you into new life. He wants to take you into a greater walk with him, to do greater things than you could have ever imagined, to be more faithful than you could have ever imagined, and to see miracle signs and wonders like you never thought before. I really want to encourage someone today, believe God for greater things. It's uncertain now in this time, and we don't know what the future looks like. Even in the future, it might be different than what we had in the past. That's okay. Different is not bad. Different can mean better. And so I really want to encourage someone this morning. Allow God to move on your heart. Allow God to change you. God is still changing lives today. He died on the cross, and we're about to celebrate his resurrection. And his resurrection wasn't just a historical event. It still changes lives today. And so I want to encourage you today. Allow Jesus to change your life, no matter how long you've been in relationship with him. Allow him to move on your heart. Change your situation. Trust him more now than you ever have before. And believe God that our best days are ahead of us, not behind us. Thank you for the opportunity this morning, Life Tabernacle Church, and I pray that you're blessed this morning.